What if I told you that the toughest stretch of the season might not be those ranked games or maybe even Farmageddon, but the real danger comes from teams that everyone is sleeping on? On today's show, let's talk trap games.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Today, we're breaking down the three most dangerous games, and they are all at the tail end of the 2025 season. And they're not the obvious ones either. We're talking Utah, Oklahoma State, and Colorado. Three late season opponents who could ruin Kansas State's Big 12 title hopes if they're not locked in. These programs have chips on their shoulders and nothing to lose and everything to prove late in the year. If Kansas State slips even just once, this entire season could unravel. We're going to get into them, break down every single one of those games. As we get closer to Big 12 Media Days, we're kind of going to get one last final glance at looking at the transfer windows and stuff before we actually get to hear from the coaches and the players just next week in Texas. Before we do so, though, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button as well, getting close to 1,000 subscribers, and find me on Twitter X at LockedOnKState. Look, this is going to be an interesting episode because we're not really talking about these teams. We have a segment every week that talks about the week 0 in Dublin with Nick Maravets. We do Farmageddon Friday. Great segment, by the way, getting a lot of awesome buzz from that. I love everybody chiming in. We've talked about how I think the scariest game on the schedule could be the Baylor Bears on the road in Waco. But when you get farther into the schedule, some of these teams towards the end might not scare you too much if you look at their record from last year, 2 of the 3 in the case that I'm talking about right now. But if you know anything about the Big 12, parity from top to bottom, this is the toughest league from first to last. And usually last place doesn't finish last twice in a season. There is a lot of changes that happen, that happen very quickly and very fast. The Big 12 media poll, which they're no longer going to do, had Arizona State in last season, and they won the whole thing. So obviously it shows that this conference is a huge question mark of what could be and what could happen. And that's why I'm worried, in a sense, about having these 3 teams towards the end of the season when potentially they could have it all clicked out. First, I want to start with the Utah Utes. New look, same Whittingham, but a new look on the offense. This is their first losing season. They just had their first losing season since 2013. They were 5-7. They were 2-7 in the Big 12. Now, obviously, there was a lot of issues stemming around their quarterback with Cam Rising, who was really close to, if not already qualifying for AARP benefits. He finally moves on and is no longer the quarterback of the team. He felt like he was there forever. I'm pretty sure since Colorado won the Natty in 90, Rising might have been a freshman then. It's still led by Kyle Whittingham, one of the most respected coaches in the nation. He's now in year 21. I mean, he's a very respected coach. When you talk about Big 12 coach rankings, even though Utah had a down year, you usually see Whittingham towards the top, if not at the very top. Now, I know we have a bias here and we really like what Chris Klieman does, but it's hard not to look past what Kyle Whittingham has had on his record and resume over 2+ decades now in college football. This is a late season game. It's cold weather. It's going to be in Utah, altitude, physicality, and it's an interesting way to end the season, or at least go towards the end of the season for Kansas State. It's the back end of a tough road trip, which we're going to get into that beginning of that road trip against Oklahoma State in just a minute. But the final 3 games of this schedule, and I know we're doing them not completely in a row, are Oklahoma State, at Utah versus Colorado. We're starting right in the middle. Utah is such an interesting case here because what is new is not only just the quarterback, but they went and got Jason Beck from New Mexico, who brings a tempo-heavy RPO scheme, totally different than what Utah has done in the past, which was really a traditional smash mouth type identity, if you will. When you think about past type of teams a few years back ago, like Zach Moss being the running back that did really well for them a few years ago in the NFL. Now, I believe he's with the Bengals now. He could be somewhere else. I'm not really sure. He was with the Colts, with the Bills. I think he's with the Bengals now, if I remember correctly. And then, of course, Devin Dampier, who had 2,700 passing yards and 1,100 rushing yards last year. Huge dual threat potential. Now, he's not Avery Johnson dual threat potential, but it's there. And some people think that he is one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. Now, if we're talking any other conference, I'd put him towards the top, but this is an amazing conference of quarterbacks. And I'm quite partial to put him a little lower on that ranking, and maybe I'll eat my shorts for that. And as we see what Jason Beck has done with his New Mexico offense and what Kyle Whittingham has done over the years, I might accidentally have to get a fork and knife. It might absolutely have to happen. But this is why I think this could possibly be a trap game. Of course, the new scheme, the quarterback, unpredictable prep. Like, that's the first thing, right? But the major thing here is this. Utah was expected to be a very good football team last year. Injuries got in the way, a few other things got in the way, and they wind up having their first losing season for in a very long time, over a decade. That's not going to happen twice. I just can't see that happening with a Kyle Whittingham team. I don't think he's lost his juice. I don't think he's lost his mojo or just how he coaches. I might not be able to say that the same for when we get to the next segment. Little teaser there, if you will. But I really think that Utah is going to be a much better team in 2025. Now, do I think they're going to be at the very top of the Big 12? No, I do not. I don't think that they're going to be 5-7, but I think they're 7-5, potentially 8-4. And that 8-4 might mean a win against Kansas State. So hopefully we're talking 7-5 here. But this is a trap game. On the road, this is a tough matchup. If you look at the end of the schedule here, you got to go to Stillwater, then you head to Utah, and then you finish with Colorado. And that's right after being at Kansas, which I'm not worried about, which you're not going to hear me talk about that on this show. We'll actually have another show later on telling you why I'm not worried about this Kansas game. And then back in Manhattan against Texas Tech, who's supposed to be a very good football team in the upcoming season. This schedule could be very tough for Kansas State. The more you look at it, the more you start learning about these teams, this could be a very tough schedule if Utah jumps back. 100%. This offensive line, best offensive line in the Big 12, according to Phil Steele. He came out with his book, his magazine newsletter, whatever the case may be. Says it's one of the best offensive lines in the Big 12. Top 10 backfield as well. Defensive returners like Smith and Snowden, Johnson, Lander Barton. There's a lot of interesting players on this Utah team that makes you want to really consider them a potential underdog. And that's why I think this could be a trap game towards the end of the season. And look, although I think that this schedule is looking tougher and tougher as we go, and maybe this is just the fact that I keep staring at it and I keep questioning everything that comes to my head because we've had way too much time to look at the same 12 games in a row. Maybe that's it. Maybe we're just overthinking all of this. And maybe next week when we get to hear Chris Klieman and most likely Avery Johnson, Austin Romaine, and a couple of those other players, we'll get that peace of mind and maybe some of this stuff will go away. But until then, doesn't Utah feel like a potential trap game? Now, for the record, I've kind of felt like this for quite some time. I have gave a prediction of 10-2 for Kansas State, and one of my losses was this road game against Utah. That's why I wanted to lead with this segment, with this team in this segment, although it's the middle of the schedule of these three teams we're discussing. My losses are to Baylor and to Utah of my first prediction, which, for the record, when we end the month here, or right when we get the beginning of the month, depending on when you listen to it, we're going to have one more pre-Big 12 Media Day prediction to go through. So we'll talk about that here in another episode very soon. What do you think? Do you think Utah is a trap game? Are you worried about Utah? Maybe the way that I'm presenting it to you right now. Let me know in the comment description below. If you're listening on audio, you can hit me up on Twitter at LockedOnKState. Next, let's get to a potential last stand for a coach that's been around for quite some time. And is it a last stand if they continue to have another season like they did last year? We'll do that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, this episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided the last minute that you want to head to the ballpark with friends and family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. Well, that's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, even invite a bigger group to come with you. And you don't have to get the Dippin' Dots in the plastic cup. You can upgrade for the Dippin' Dots in that little cool baseball cap because you've had the savings with Game Time. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easier to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. I mean, I am really interested, and I said this last week as well. Anytime Paul Skeens is pitching, I'm locked in. I'm so locked in. There's a conversation about him potentially trying to shoot with this new scheme and style of him being a potential 30-game winner. We haven't seen that in quite some time, so bring it on. So Game Time, last-minute tickets, the zone deals, big savings. The best part about it is you can see the seat view right from the app before you buy, so you know exactly where you're going to be sitting. And it gets everything you want, and what it does is it takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And that's what Game Time absolutely does. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. What will the Oklahoma State Cowboys be in 2025? Well, to be completely honest, I think they have no other way but to be better than they were last season. Last year, 3-9 overall, 0-9 in the Big 12. I mean, absolutely rock bottom for a program that was just a few years ago battling for a Big 12 championship. And this was a year where we really expected them to be pretty decent. We didn't expect them to be 0-9 for the record. And also for the record, let's just put this out there. And I'm sure if you are a Big 12 believer like I am, you already know this, but they might have been 0-9 in the Big 12, but they were 1-0 last year against the SEC. They did defeat Arkansas in a game last season. So just make sure I get that little nugget on this episode. But one thing that we have to make sure that we talk about on this episode, not just nuggets, we need to talk about the fact that Kansas State cannot overlook this game, especially if Oklahoma State is fighting for bowl eligibility, which that's a huge jump up in what could potentially be Oklahoma State's season. Obviously going from 3-9 to 6-6 would be quite something. And I think that is probably the only way that you save Gundy's job. So I think potentially when you're talking about either fighting for bowl eligibility or one of the legends in coaching over the last 2 decades, just like Whittingham we just discussed with Utah, he is definitely on the hot seat. Gundy is most definitely on the hot seat. And if they are battling, and we're talking about the fact that we're talking week 10 here. So there's only going to be 2 other games for Oklahoma State for them to go at it after the Kansas State game. And those games I actually don't even have their schedule up. Let me pull it up here. After Kansas State, they have UCF, which is good for them. That's probably, who knows, UCF could have figured it out by then, but I do think UCF's can be towards the bottom. And Iowa State. And Iowa State could be finding themselves a possibility of maybe being a bowl contention team. Who knows if the wheels fall off after we beat the brakes out of them in Dublin. But there is a sure thing possibility that they head into Manhattan with 3 games left on their schedule, and they're sitting at 3-6, meaning they have to win out to get bowl eligibility. That is definitely a possibility. And if that's the case, that makes that team even more dangerous. I wouldn't look at that record and say, yeah, let's just brush them off. Now, that's a team with nothing to lose. In a world where the portal happens, where recruiting is huge, where players will leave for the NFL draft early if they have opportunities, if you don't have a direction moving forward, and who knows, because of how this new NIL and portal window works, if they're 3-6 heading into Kansas State and they lose to Kansas State and go to 3-7 and they no longer are eligible for a bowl game, that might be Gundy's last game. Like there might be a firing that Monday, just so they can get the wheels turning and finding a head coach sooner than as soon as they possibly can. There's pressure on Mike Gundy. He took a pay cut. He had to restructure his deal, fired both coordinators. He's been told by donors it's time to prove it, or it's the beginning of the end. But they've had some key roster moves. We'll see if it's enough to make some changes. Garrett Rangel is gone. Ollie Gordon off the NFL, which I thought Ollie Gordon was going to be a huge difference maker for Oklahoma State last year. And he was great. He was great his entire career in Stillwater, but just wasn't enough. As you mentioned, they got new coordinators. Doug Meacham taking over the offense. Todd Grantham taking over the defense. Totally new identity. So is this a 3-9 identity? A 6-6 identity? Or even better? I have them just missing the cut. Just giving you a little teaser of what I'm predicting right now. And we are going to have a big Big 12 conversation here. The network here on Locked On is going to have our Big 12 media polls. And I'll just say Oklahoma State making a bowl game. But I think they improved, though. I would say 5 wins, which means that there is a possibility that they are fighting for their lives when they're fighting in Manhattan. And that's a dangerous game. Nothing more dangerous than a Gundy team with all the pressure in the world. This could be the prove it we're still alive moment for the Cowboys. And against a Kansas State team who is well respected by the entire conference and thinks that they will most likely be battling for a Big 12 conference position, a chance there. And the reason I say chance is because last year there was 4 teams that were tied for the very top with 2 losses in the conference. So, the way that it shakes out at the end, who knows? If K-State is banged up, that's another thing. If they're injured or looking ahead, because that's obviously one more thing to worry about, looking ahead to Utah, Oklahoma State could sneak one in. And that can't happen. That absolutely can't happen in this one. No way, no how. Oklahoma State, then Utah, after playing Texas Tech. And I just realized, I think I was saying that this game is in Manhattan this entire time. I was looking at Oklahoma State's schedule. I pulled it up. I apologize. This one is on the road. This one's in Stillwater. So I want to make sure I don't mess that up. I think I did just a few minutes ago, and I apologize. The 2 games that we've already discussed, Utah and Oklahoma State, on the road, back-to-back, starting in Stillwater. That's tough. You get to finish the season back in Manhattan, though. And it's against a team that we probably have the most questions about in the entire conference. And what does that mean for the Colorado Buffaloes? We'll talk about that next to finish up that show right here on Locked On Kansas State. Well, there's no stars left in Colorado, or is there? There's a ton of stars when it comes to the Colorado Buffaloes, but most of them probably are on the coaching staff now. Coach Prime no longer has his son, Shedeur Sanders, and the Heisman Trophy winner on his squad. But are they still ready for the fight after having their best season under Coach Deion Sanders, Coach Prime? Will they be taking a step back? That's a big question. And if they are, does that mean they'll be fighting for their lives at the very end of the season against Kansas State? They finished the season in Manhattan against the Wildcats, Week 12. And that could be a game that really makes you want to pay attention. That could be must-watch TV for not just Big 12 watchers, because when you got Coach Prime on the TV, it's not just for people who are watching in the Midwest or in Texas, or in this case, Arizona, because conferences locations don't matter anymore. Ask the ACC with Pacific Coast teams. But when you have Deion Sanders on the screen, people are paying attention. We've seen that the last few years. We've seen that even when he was coaching at Jackson State. People paid attention. Final game of the season, no Shedeur Sanders, no Travis Hunter, both off the NFL, obviously. But don't let that fool you. I think Coach Prime's actually reloaded quite well. 9 defensive starters are gone, though. Offensive player of the year, the Big 12, Shedeur. Heisman winner, Travis Hunter, obviously irreplaceable. And he's like 2 players. I mean, you see what he's doing with the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. He just signed his contract, and they put out 2 tweets for him. They said, we signed wide receiver, Travis Hunter. We signed defensive back, Travis Hunter. They're trying to do that at the professional level, and we all know what he did for Colorado over the last couple seasons. But as I mentioned, they reloaded. They brought in 26 transfers. This is not new to them. They did this just a few years ago when Deion took over. Now, they weren't amazing the first year under Deion Sanders. They obviously had that really exciting game against TCU in Nebraska, Colorado State to start the season. The hype was there. It was like the perfect storybook start for Deion Sanders. But then it started to get realistic for him. Last year was great. Last year, they just missed out on, obviously, the Big 12 championship, but they reached a couple goals that needed to happen for the program. But now at 26 transfers, a couple coming in from the SEC, like Jason Beck from Alabama. You also have former Kansas State defensive back Noah King, who was a part of this recruiting class, 4-star, according to a couple agencies. He's now on their side. He entered the portal in the spring window, and he headed to Kansas State. Pat Shurmur is the offensive coordinator, and coming from the Cincinnati Bengals, Robert Livingston is going to be the defensive coordinator. So that could add some stability for Coach Prime. This is where I think could be a trap game, and I've kind of already alluded to it, but Colorado might be 5-6 going into this game. And I know that is a step back from last year, but let's be honest with the fact that they have had so many players leave. And even with the fact that, bringing in these transfers, and this is the 3rd year in the system, and I understand that. I get how that goes. But if you look at their schedule, now their schedule is actually pretty decent. But there is a possibility. If there is, then, looking at their schedule now, I don't know if it's going to actually happen. They got all the ones that I wish Kansas State played, which we're going to get to in another episode. But you play Houston, you play Arizona, West Virginia. You do have to play BYU and Arizona State. Your non-conference games are Wyoming, Georgia Tech, and Delaware. Georgia Tech's a good team. So, there is a small chance. Let's say out of these 3, I'd probably say this is the least of a trap game. But you got to maybe wonder. Imagine we're heading into November 29th in Manhattan. It's the final game of the year. Colorado's 5-6. Kansas State's already got 2 losses in the conference. They need to win to get to the Big 12 championship. It's either bowl eligibility for Colorado or it's Dr. Pepper for Kansas State. Who's going to want it more? Who's going to want it more? That'll be must-watch TV. That'll probably be a national televised game if that happens to end the season for Kansas State. So those are 3 tough trap games. I think they have potential to be trap games right away. Primetime drama, a team with nothing to lose and all the spotlight. That's what Colorado potentially could be if they go into Manhattan at 5-6. And I wouldn't say nothing to lose, everything to lose. Kansas State heads into Manhattan tired and overconfident because you just had 2 most likely hard-nosed, tough games on the road in Stillwater and Utah. This could be spoiler all over it. Spoiler alert. And what better way would Coach Prime love to just stick his face and put down his flag and stomp his foot down about saying, putting the Big 12 on the map, putting his brand on the map after beating Kansas State, who most likely will be a Big 12 championship contender at that moment. I don't think we see a scenario where Colorado is fighting for the Big 12 championship. Not this season. I think they do take a step back. Like I said, I think they could be fighting for bowl eligibility. The best case scenario for Kansas State in all of this scenario is not to have any of these teams have that type of scenario hit them. For example, Colorado. Hope they hit their 6th win before they get to the final game of the season. Even if it's 6-5 heading into them, if they lose, they still got a bowl game. Like, that's what you want. You don't want them going in there 5-6. You don't want that happening. When it comes to Oklahoma State, if they are 5, or if they got the fact that they could be eliminated from bowl eligibility, you don't want that. So in the case of Oklahoma State, because you're playing them kind of early, you kind of hope they lose a lot of games fast and have their 7th loss before they even head to facing Kansas State. And for Utah, I just don't see it. I don't see them having a worry in the world, to be honest. I think they're going to be a better team, but just where they play, second to last game of the season, potentially they could only be at 5 wins, or even, not a good case, 4 wins, and then they'd have to win out as well. You don't want any of those scenarios to happen if you're Kansas State, because then you are fighting another beast inside the game other than the game itself. You're fighting the fact that they have no tomorrow if they lose this game against Kansas State. And even in a world where bowl games don't seem to matter as much, which is unfortunate, but in this new world with NIL and the college football playoffs that are expanding as well, it still means something. It still means something to recruiting, I think. It still means something to the coaching staffs and the players that are still playing the game. They don't want to be that team that heads into Big 12 Media Days like they're going to this week, and one of the first questions they hear is, you didn't make a bowl game last year. You finished the season 5-7. How are you going to improve? That's not a fun conversation to have. You want to have the conversation where you made the bowl game, even if you played in the Rape Bowl against Rutgers, a bowl game that you didn't want to play in, one that you thought that you should have been in a better bowl game, like the college football playoffs, but the wheels fell off. I don't know who I'm talking about here, but you still want to have that happen. Later on this week, maybe even this weekend, we're going to talk about some more conversations with the schedule before we get closer to the Big 12 Media Days happening on the 7th and 8th of July. This first week of July, the last couple of days of June as well, we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about some scheduling thoughts. We're going to talk about some of these other teams that in the conference that we don't have to face and why that actually might not be a good thing. We're going to talk about that as well. And then I will give you my new prediction as we head into the final month of the year where we do not play college football, folks. That's July. We play football in August. We are getting that much closer to that. And obviously 4th of July is coming up. We will have Farmageddon Friday for you. We got plenty of stuff coming up for you. We're back to every day of the week, Monday through Friday. June was a little fun. I guess you could call it vacation time for us. It's like our only off season right before the media days, but don't worry. We are right back here bringing you Locked On Kansas State every single day of the week, Monday through Friday, back again. So please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time right here on Locked On Kansas State.